They said it was a heart attack, natural causes, a hero's quiet end. But Grace Sullivan saw the syringe go in, and she knew that drug didn't belong anywhere near a cardiac patient. She tried to stop it. She reached for the IV line, and the respected surgeon looked her dead in the eye and said, "Get this nobody out of my trauma room." Security dragged her into the hallway. The door slammed shut, and inside, a decorated Admiral, a man who'd survived 3 wars, began to die. Not from his wounds, from the medicine. Grace had seen this before. Once, on a rooftop in Kandahar, a betrayal that killed 11 soldiers and buried her name in a file marked classified. Now it was happening again. Same poison, same method, same man, and this time she wasn't going to let him walk away. If you want to see how a nobody nurse becomes the most dangerous person in the room, stick with me to the very end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's go. Grace Sullivan had been invisible for 6 years. She preferred it that way. She clocked in at Riverside General Hospital every evening at 1900 hours, worked the graveyard shift in the ICU, and left before the day staff arrived. She didn't make small talk, didn't attend the holiday parties, didn't correct people when they called her the new girl, even though she'd been there longer than half the attending physicians. Most people didn't even know her last name. That was fine. She wasn't there to be remembered. She was there because it was the only job that didn't ask questions about the 4-year gap in her resume. The only place that didn't care why a woman with her skill set would settle for entry-level wages and night shifts in a mid-tier hospital on the edge of Richmond, Virginia. Grace had learned a long time ago that being nobody kept you alive. But tonight, that was about to change. It started with the convoy. 3 black SUVs rolled up to the emergency bay at 23:47 hours, no lights, no sirens. Grace noticed them from the 4th-floor break room window. She'd been refilling her coffee, her third of the shift, when the vehicles appeared, smooth and synchronized, like they'd done this 100 times before. Federal plates, tinted windows, men in suits stepping out before the engines even cut off. Grace's hand tightened around the mug. She knew that kind of arrival. She'd seen it in Baghdad, in Jalalabad, in places that didn't have names on any map. It meant someone important was about to come through those doors, someone the government didn't want the public to know about. She set the coffee down and moved toward the stairwell. By the time she reached the ER, the chaos had already started. Nurses were being pulled from their rotations. The trauma chief was shouting orders. 2 men in dark suits stood near the intake desk, stone-faced, scanning the room like they were searching for threats. And then the gurney came through. Grace saw him before anyone said his name. Mid-60s, silver hair, olive drab jacket draped over his shoulders despite the oxygen mask strapped to his face. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. His left hand, still gripping the gurney rail, bore a Naval Academy ring, scratched and dented from decades of wear. Admiral Richard Calloway. Grace felt the air leave her lungs. She knew that name. Everyone in the military knew that name. 3 tours. Silver Star, Purple Heart. The man who'd led the operation that took down the Khalid network in 2014. A legend, a ghost. Someone most people thought had retired into obscurity years ago. But here he was, dying. "Trauma 4!" the ER attending barked. "Move, move, move!" The gurney shot down the hallway, flanked by nurses and paramedics. Grace stayed back, pressed against the wall, watching the suits follow close behind. One of them glanced her way, cold, assessing, and then dismissed her just as quickly. She was nobody, just another nurse in scrubs. But her instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Grace slipped into the stairwell and took the stairs 2 at a time, reaching the trauma wing 30 seconds before the gurney did. She ducked into the supply room across from Trauma 4 and cracked the door, just enough to see inside. The room exploded into motion. Nurses hooked up monitors. An anesthesiologist prepped sedation. The attending, Dr. Elliot Vance, a man Grace had worked alongside for 2 years but never actually spoken to, was already barking orders. And then he walked in. Dr. Nathan Mercer. Tall, composed, graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished instead of old. Chief of cardiothoracic surgery, the kind of doctor who got interviewed on the news, the kind of man who walked into a room and everyone else got quieter. Grace's stomach turned to ice. She hadn't seen him in 6 years, hadn't heard his voice, Hadn't let herself think about the last time she'd been in the same room as him. But she remembered. Kandahar. 2018. A field hospital set up in a bombed-out school. 11 soldiers bleeding out on canvas cots. And Nathan Mercer, then a contracted trauma surgeon for the DOD, standing over them with that same calm, controlled expression. He'd walked out of that hospital 30 minutes before the airstrike hit. He'd walked out alive. Everyone else burned. Grace forced herself to breathe. Focus. You don't know it's him. You don't know. But then Mercer spoke. Let's get him stabilized. Start a vasopressor drip. I want a full cardiac workup and labs every 15 minutes. His voice was smooth, authoritative, the kind of voice people trusted. Grace wanted to vomit. She stayed in the doorway, half hidden, watching as the team worked. The Admiral's vitals were all over the place. BP dropping, heart rate spiking, oxygen sat hovering at 89%. Vance was running point, but Mercer was the one calling the shots. Any history of arrhythmia? Mercer asked. One of the suits stepped forward. Negative. He was fine until 20 minutes ago. Collapsed during a briefing. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy, Vance muttered. Classic presentation. Mercer nodded. Agreed. Let's get him on. Wait. Grace's voice cut through the room before she realized she'd spoken. Every head turned. She stepped into the trauma bay, her heart hammering, but her face blank. Mercer's eyes landed on her. There was no recognition, no flicker of memory. She was nobody. Excuse me? Vance said, his tone sharp. Who the hell are— Check his pupils, Grace said quietly. And his skin. Look at his hands. Vance's jaw tightened. Nurse, you need to leave. Now. But one of the younger residents had already moved closer to the Admiral, leaning in. Doc, the resident said slowly, his pupils are pinpoint. Vance frowned. What? And his skin, it's clammy, cold. He's diaphoretic, but his temp is normal. Mercer's expression didn't change, but Grace saw it. The smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. That's not cardiomyopathy, Grace said, louder now. That's poisoning. The room went silent. Vance stared at her like she'd grown a second head. What did you just say? His vitals aren't erratic. They're suppressed. Pinpoint pupils, bradycardia, respiratory depression. That's opioid toxicity. Or worse. That's absurd, Mercer said smoothly. He's a sitting admiral. You think someone poisoned him? I think someone gave him something that's killing him right now. Vance stepped between them, his face flushed. You're out of line, nurse. He glanced at her badge. Sullivan, you don't walk into my trauma bay and start throwing around accusations. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm telling you what I see. You see what you're trained to see, Vance snapped. And you're trained to follow orders, so get out. Grace didn't move. Her eyes locked on the IV line running into the Admiral's arm. The bag hanging above him was standard saline, but the port, the small injection site halfway down the line, had a residue on it. Faint. Almost invisible. But there. What's in the IV? She asked. Mercer's gaze sharpened. Saline. Nothing else. Then you won't mind if I check. She moved toward the line. Mercer stepped in front of her. Nurse Sullivan, he said, his voice still calm, still controlled. You're interfering with a critical patient. Step back, now. Grace looked up at him, and for the first time in 6 years she let herself see him. The same face, the same voice, the same lie. You're killing him, she said quietly. Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. Security. 2 guards appeared in the doorway within seconds. Escort Nurse Sullivan out of this room, Mercer said, and make sure she doesn't come back. Grace didn't resist as they grabbed her arms, didn't fight as they pulled her toward the door, but she kept her eyes on the IV line, and she saw it, the faint shimmer in the tubing, the discoloration that shouldn't be there. She'd seen it before. Kandahar, 2018. Right before 11, soldiers stopped breathing. They threw her into the hallway and slammed the door. Grace hit the wall hard enough to knock the breath out of her lungs. One of the guards stepped forward, hand on his belt, but she raised both hands. I'm going, she said. He didn't move. She walked. Her mind was racing. He's in there. He's doing it again. She turned the corner, ducked into the nurse's station, and grabbed the desk phone. "Who are you calling?" one of the night nurses asked. Grace didn't answer. She dialed the hospital director's emergency line. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. She slammed the phone down and tried again. This time, she called the charge nurse supervisor. Voicemail. Of course. She looked at the clock. 0014 hours. The Admiral had maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. Grace turned and sprinted back toward Trauma 4. The guards saw her coming. "Ma'am, you need to—" She didn't slow down. One of them stepped in front of her, hand out, and she ducked under his arm, twisted past him, and shoved the trauma room door open. Inside, alarms were screaming. The Admiral was seizing. His back arched off the gurney, limbs jerking violently, foam building at the corners of his mouth. The monitors showed his heart rate plummeting. 42, 38, 35. "He's crashing!" Vance shouted. "Get the crash cart!" Mercer stood at the head of the bed, hands steady, syringe in hand. Grace's blood turned to ice. "Stop!" she screamed. No one listened. Mercer pressed the plunger, and the Admiral flatlined. The sound was unmistakable, that long, unbroken tone that every medical professional knows. The sound that means you're out of time. Grace didn't think. She launched herself across the room, shoving past a resident, and slammed her hands down on the Admiral's chest. "What the hell are you doing?" Vance yelled. Grace ignored him. She locked her elbows, positioned her hands, and started compressions. Hard, fast, exactly 100 beats per minute. "Nurse Sullivan, step away from the patient. He's in V-fib," Grace snapped. "Charge the paddles." "You don't give orders in my—" "Charge the goddamn paddles!" One of the residents, a young woman with wide eyes, grabbed the defibrillator and started charging it. 200 joules, Grace said. "That's too high for initial—" "Do it!" The resident's hand shook as she handed over the paddles. Grace pressed them to the Admiral's chest. "Clear!" The body convulsed. The monitor didn't change, still flatline. "Again," Grace said. "Charge to 300. "Sullivan, you're going to kill him," Vance said, but his voice had lost its edge. He was watching her now, really watching. Grace didn't look up. "He's already dead. I'm bringing him back." She placed the paddles again. "Clear." Another jolt, another flatline. Grace dropped the paddles and went back to compressions. Her shoulders burned. Her hands ached. But she didn't stop. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. "Someone get me an amp of epi," she said. "We already gave him—" "Get me another one. Now." A nurse handed her the syringe. Grace didn't break rhythm. She took it, jabbed it into the IV port, and slammed the plunger down with her thumb. Then back to compressions. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, you stubborn bastard!" Mercer's voice cut through the chaos. "Nurse Sullivan, you need to call it." "He's gone." Grace's head snapped up. Mercer stood on the other side of the gurney, arms crossed, face calm. Too calm. "He's not gone," Grace said. "He's been down for 4 minutes. Even if you get a rhythm back, the brain damage, I said he's not gone." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You're emotionally compromised. Step away from the patient or I'll have you removed." Grace leaned in, still doing compressions, and locked eyes with him. "Try it," she said. For a moment, no one moved. Then the monitor beeped. Once, twice, a rhythm, weak, irregular, but there. The room exhaled. "I've got a pulse," the resident said, voice shaking. "Faint, but it's there." Vance stepped closer, staring at the monitor like he didn't believe it. "How did you—" Grace pulled her hands back, breathing hard. "Because I know what I'm doing." She looked at Mercer. His face was unreadable, but his hands, still holding the empty syringe, were clenched tight. Grace wiped the sweat from her forehead and turned to Vance. "You need to run a tox screen, full panel, and you need to do it now." Vance hesitated. "Sullivan, I don't think—" "He was poisoned," Grace said. "I don't care if you believe me. Run the test." "That's a serious accusation." "Then prove me wrong." Vance looked at Mercer. Mercer shrugged. "If it'll put her mind at ease, run the test. I'm sure it'll come back clean." Grace's jaw tightened. He's too calm. He knows something. Vance nodded to one of the nurses. "Draw the blood. Send it to the lab. Mark it urgent." The nurse moved quickly, pulling a vial from the Admiral's IV line. Grace watched Mercer the entire time. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there. waiting. And that's when Grace realized, he's not worried about the test. He's worried about me. The lab results came back 23 minutes later. Grace was sitting in the hallway outside Trauma 4, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. She'd been ordered to stay put until administration arrived. 2 security guards stood at the end of the corridor, watching her like she might bolt. She wasn't going anywhere, not until she knew. The door to Trauma 4 opened and Vance stepped out. His face was pale. Grace stood. What did it say? Vance didn't answer right away. He looked at the guards, then back at her. The talk screen came back positive, he said quietly. Trace amounts of vicuronium in his system. Grace's stomach dropped. Vicuronium. A paralytic. Used in surgery to keep patients from moving during intubation. But in the wrong dose, or given outside of a controlled setting, it stopped the diaphragm, stopped breathing, stopped everything. It was the same drug they'd found in the bodies in Kandahar. How much? Grace asked. Enough to cause respiratory arrest, Vance said. If you hadn't restarted his heart when you did. He trailed off. Grace's hands curled into fists. Where's Mercer? He left. Said he had another surgery. You let him leave? Sullivan, I don't know what you think is happening here, but Dr. Mercer is one of the most respected surgeons in this hospital. If you're suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you, he poisoned that man. Vance's jaw tightened. That's a hell of a claim. Then check the IV. Check the port. You'll find residue. We already did. Grace froze. And? It was clean. Her heart sank. Of course it was. He swapped it out. Vance crossed his arms. Look, I don't know what you saw or what you think you saw, but right now the only thing I know for sure is that you broke protocol, assaulted a patient, and caused a scene in my trauma bay. I saved his life. Maybe. Or maybe you got lucky. Vance stepped closer. Either way, you're suspended, effective immediately. Grace stared at him. You're kidding. I wish I was. Administration wants you out of the building until they finish their investigation. Investigation into what? I didn't do anything wrong. You disobeyed a direct order. You put your hands on a patient without authorization, and you made unsubstantiated accusations against a senior physician. Vance's voice softened. I'm sorry, Sullivan, but my hands are tied. Grace wanted to scream. Instead, she just nodded. Fine. Vance looked surprised. That's it? No argument? Would it matter? He hesitated, then shook his head. Probably not. Grace turned and walked toward the elevator. The guards didn't follow her. She stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and leaned against the wall as the doors closed. Her mind was racing. Mercer knew I'd checked the IV. He cleaned it before anyone could test it, which means he was ready for this, which means this wasn't his first time. The elevator dinged. Ground floor. Grace stepped out into the main lobby. It was nearly empty, just a few people in the waiting area, a janitor mopping the floor, and a woman at the reception desk typing on her computer. Grace walked past them all, pushed through the front doors, and stepped out into the cold night air. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then dialed a number she hadn't called in 6 years. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, rough, tired, familiar. Sullivan? Grace closed her eyes. Hey, Reeves. There was a long pause. I thought you were dead, Reeves said. I thought you didn't care. A dry laugh. Fair, what do you need? Grace looked back at the hospital. The lights were still on in Trauma 4. I need you to run a name for me, she said. Nathan Mercer. He's a surgeon at Riverside General. I need to know everywhere he's worked in the last 10 years. Why? Because I think he's killing people, and I think he's been doing it for a long time. Another pause. Then Reeves said, I'll call you back in an hour. The line went dead. Grace stood there staring at her phone, breathing in the cold air. She'd spent 6 years being nobody, but tonight that ended. Reeves called back in 43 minutes. Grace was sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot, engine off, windows cracked. She answered on the first ring. What did you find? Nothing good. Reeves's voice was grim. Mercer's got a clean record, spotless actually, Harvard Med, residency at Johns Hopkins, published in 6 journals. The guy's a rock star. That's the public record. What about the other one? A pause. How do you know there's another one? Because there's always another one. Reeves sighed. You're right. Took some digging, but I found it. Mercer worked as a contractor for the DoD from 2016 to 2019, embedded with forward surgical teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. Grace's chest tightened. Where in Afghanistan? Kandahar, Helmand Province, a couple other places that aren't on the map. Was he there in 2018? Yeah, why? Grace didn't answer. Sullivan, what's going on? He was there, Grace said quietly, the night my unit got hit. Reeves went silent. You're sure? He finally said. I'm sure. Jesus. Grace leaned her head back against the seat. What else? After he left the DoD, he went private. High-end consulting gigs, a couple of hospitals in Europe. Then he came back stateside 3 years ago and landed at Riverside General. Any red flags, complaints, malpractice suits? None, like I said, the guy's clean. Too clean. Yeah, Reeves said. That's what I thought too. Grace rubbed her eyes. I need more. Patient records, surgical outcomes, anything that shows a pattern. That's going to take time. And access I don't have. Then get it. Sullivan? He's doing it again, Reeves. He's killing people, and no one's stopping him because he's too smart, too careful, too clean. Her voice cracked. I'm not letting him walk away this time. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll see what I can dig up, but you need to be careful. If Mercer's as connected as he looks, you're poking a hornet's nest. I don't care. I know. That's what worries me. The line went dead. Grace sat in the dark, staring at the hospital through the windshield. Somewhere inside, the Admiral was still alive, still breathing, but for how long? She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to the only place she knew she could think clearly, an old diner on the edge of town, open 24 hours, fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl boots, coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Grace slid into a corner booth, ordered a cup, and spread her notes out on the table. She'd started keeping a journal 6 years ago, not because she wanted to remember, because she was afraid she'd forget. 11 names. 11 soldiers who died in Kandahar. She'd written them down the day after the airstrike, written their ranks, their hometowns, the last things they said before Mercer walked out and the bombs fell. Grace stared at the list. PFC Marcus Tully, Omaha, Nebraska. Tell my mom I'm sorry. SGT Vanessa Cole, Portland, Oregon. I'm not going to make it, am I? Corporal James Rivera, Austin, Texas. Just don't let me die alone. Grace's hand shook. She'd told herself for 6 years that there was nothing she could have done, that the airstrike was bad intel, bad timing, bad luck. But she'd never believed it. Because she'd seen Mercer leave, she'd seen the way he looked at his watch, the way he packed his gear, the way he walked out without a word. And 30 minutes later, the building exploded. Grace had been outside doing a perimeter check. She'd survived. Everyone else burned. And when the investigation came, they told her it was an accident, a miscommunication, a tragedy. They told her to move on. So she did. She buried the uniform, buried the medals, buried the name, and she became nobody. But now, sitting in this diner staring at those 11 names, Grace realized something. She hadn't moved on. She'd just been waiting. Her phone buzzed. A text from Reeves. Found something. Call me. Grace didn't hesitate. Reeves answered immediately. What is it? I pulled Mercer's surgical records from the last 3 years, cross-referenced them with patient outcomes. And he's got a 97% success rate, which is insane. Best in the hospital. Grace frowned. That's good, right? It would be, except I dug deeper, looked at the patients who didn't make it. How many? 8. 8 out of how many surgeries? 263. Grace did the math. That's a 3% mortality rate. Exactly. Well within acceptable margins. Except here's the thing. All 8 of those patients died from complications that didn't match their initial diagnoses. Grace sat up straighter. What do you mean? I mean a guy comes in with a broken rib, gets surgery, and dies from a sudden cardiac event. A woman comes in with appendicitis, gets surgery, and dies from respiratory failure. Another guy comes in with a hernia, gets surgery, and dies from organ failure. Could be coincidence. Could be. Except every single one of those patients was either military or former military. Grace's blood ran cold. Say that again. Every patient who died under Mercer's care in the last 3 years was connected to the DOD, active duty, veterans, contractors. All of them. Grace's mind raced. What about the Admiral? What about him? Is he on that list? He's not dead yet, so no. But if you're asking if he fits the profile... Reeves paused. Yeah, he does. Grace stood, grabbing her jacket. I need to get back to the hospital. Sullivan, wait. He's going to try again. I know he is. Then call the police, call the FBI. Don't go back there alone. And tell them what? That a decorated surgeon is secretly killing veterans because of a hunch? They'll laugh me out of the room. Then what's your plan? Grace didn't have one, but she wasn't going to let Mercer finish what he started. I'll figure it out, she said, and hung up. She made it back to Riverside General in 14 minutes, parked in the visitor lot, walked through the front entrance like she belonged there. No one stopped her. The night shift was in full swing, nurses bustling between rooms, doctors reviewing charts, security doing rounds. Grace kept her head down and headed straight for the ICU. The Admiral had been moved there after he stabilized, room 412. Grace took the stairs, avoiding the elevators, and slipped into the ICU wing through the side entrance. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Grace's instincts flared. She moved quickly, staying close to the wall, and stopped outside room 412. The door was cracked open. Inside, she could hear the soft beep of the heart monitor. And voices. Grace pressed herself against the wall and listened. Stable for now, but we need to move fast. That was Mercer. How long until the next dose? Grace didn't recognize the second voice. Male, clipped, authoritative. Another hour, Mercer said. Maybe less. Depends on his metabolism. And you're sure no one will trace it? I'm sure. The talk screen already came back clean. What about the nurse, the one who interfered? A pause. She's been handled, suspended. And even if she talks, no one will believe her. Good. The last thing we need is another complication. Grace's hands curled into fists. Another complication, like Kandahar. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and opened the voice recorder. Then she stepped closer to the door. What about Calloway? The second voice said. Does he know? No, and he won't. He'll be dead before he wakes up. You're certain? I've done this before, Mercer said. Trust me. Grace hit record. 11 times before, the second voice said. 12, if you count tonight. Grace's breath caught. 12. He just admitted it. She had him. But before she could move, the door swung open. Mercer stood in the doorway, staring directly at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Mercer smiled. Hello, Nurse Sullivan. Grace didn't run. She stepped into the room. The second man was there. Tall, gray suit, cold eyes. He looked at Mercer. Who is this? The complication I mentioned, Mercer said. The man's hand moved to his jacket. Grace saw the bulge. Gun. She didn't think. She lunged, grabbed the nearest object, a metal tray, and swung it hard. It connected with the man's wrist. He grunted, stumbled back, and the gun clattered to the floor. Grace dove for it, but Mercer was faster. He kicked it across the room and grabbed her by the arm, slamming her against the wall. You should have stayed gone, he said quietly. Grace drove her knee into his stomach. He gasped, loosened his grip, and she twisted free. The second man was already moving, reaching for the gun. Grace didn't let him. She grabbed the IV pole and swung it like a bat. It caught him across the shoulder and he went down hard. Mercer came at her again. This time, Grace was ready. She ducked under his swing, stepped inside his reach, and drove her elbow into his ribs. Once, twice. He staggered back, breathing hard. Grace grabbed the gun from the floor and leveled it at both of them. Don't move. Mercer raised his hands, but he was still smiling. You're not going to shoot me, Sullivan. You're a nurse. You save lives. You don't take them. Grace's finger tightened on the trigger. Try me. Behind her, the heart monitor beeped steadily. The Admiral was still alive, still breathing, and Grace wasn't going to let anyone change that. She backed toward the door, gun still raised, and pulled out her phone. Dialed 911. "This is Grace Sullivan. I'm at Riverside General Hospital, ICU room 412. I need police and federal agents, now." The operator started asking questions. Grace didn't answer. She just kept the gun trained on Mercer and waited. Mercer's smile faded. "You have no idea what you just did," he said softly. "Yeah," Grace said. "I do." Outside, sirens began to wail. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the hospital corridors like a countdown. Grace kept the gun steady, her arms locked, barrel pointed at Mercer's chest. The man in the gray suit stayed on the floor, one hand pressed against his shoulder where the IV pole had connected. He wasn't moving. Smart. Mercer, though, he looked almost relaxed. Hands raised, palms out, but his posture was casual, like he'd been in this position before and knew exactly how it would end. "You're making a mistake," he said. Grace didn't blink. "The only mistake I made was not shooting you 6 years ago." "Kandahar," Mercer said softly, "you still think that was my fault?" "I know it was." "You don't know anything." The sirens cut off outside. Car doors slammed. Footsteps thundered through the lobby below. Grace backed toward the door, keeping both men in her line of sight. "We'll let them decide." Mercer's smile returned. "You recorded us. I heard the phone. Very clever." "Thanks. But it won't matter. We'll see." "No," Mercer said, his voice dropping. "We won't. Because the moment those officers walk through that door, you're the one holding the gun. You're the one who assaulted a physician. You're the one who broke into a patient's room after being suspended." He tilted his head. "Tell me, Nurse Sullivan, who do you think they're going to believe?" Grace's grip tightened. He was right. She knew he was right. But she didn't lower the gun. The door burst open. 2 uniformed officers rushed in, weapons drawn. "Drop the gun, now!" Grace didn't move. "These men were trying to kill the patient. I have it recorded." "Drop the gun." "Listen to me." One of the officers stepped closer, his weapon aimed at her head. "Ma'am, I will not ask again. Put the gun on the floor and step back." Grace's heart hammered. She looked at Mercer. He was watching her with that same calm expression, waiting. She set the gun down, slowly, then raised her hands. The officer moved in fast, kicking the weapon away and grabbing her arm. He spun her around, slamming her against the wall, and pulled her wrists behind her back. The cuffs clicked into place. "You're under arrest for assault, trespassing, and attempted murder." "Attempted murder?" Grace twisted to look at him. "Are you kidding me? You drew a weapon on 2 unarmed men in a hospital. They were poisoning the patient." The officer ignored her. He turned to Mercer. "Are you all right, sir?" Mercer straightened his jacket. "I'm fine. Thank you, officer. Miss Sullivan has been unwell. We've been trying to help her, but she's become increasingly unstable." Grace's blood boiled. "That's a lie." "She was suspended earlier tonight for assaulting a patient," Mercer continued. "And now this. I think she needs psychiatric evaluation." "You son of a—" The officer yanked her back. "That's enough." "Check the recording," Grace shouted. "It's on my phone. He admitted everything." The second officer picked up her phone from the floor. He looked at the screen. "It's locked. The passcode is 0718. Open the voice recorder app. It's all there." The officer glanced at his partner, then back at Grace. "We'll review it at the station." "No, you need to listen to it now. The patient is still in danger." "Ma'am, you need to calm down." "I am calm. Just listen to the damn recording." But they weren't listening. They were already walking her toward the door. Grace looked back at the Admiral. He was still unconscious, still breathing. The monitor showed a steady rhythm. But for how long? Mercer stepped into her path. He leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper. "You should have stayed nobody." Grace spat in his face. He didn't flinch, just pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his cheek. Then he smiled. The officers dragged her out. They put her in the back of a patrol car. No sirens this time, just the quiet hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Grace sat in the back seat, hands cuffed behind her, staring at the hospital as it disappeared behind them. She'd failed. Mercer was still in there, still free, still in control. And the Admiral was still dying. Grace closed her eyes and tried to think. The recording. They have the recording. That's something. That's enough. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't true. Mercer had already spun the narrative. Unstable nurse, psychiatric evaluation, assault charges. By the time anyone listened to the recording, if they even bothered, it would be too late. The car pulled into the police station. The officers walked her inside, through the booking area, past the desk sergeant, and into a small interrogation room. They sat her down, removed the cuffs, and left her alone. Grace rubbed her wrist and looked around. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor, a camera in the corner, red light blinking. She'd been in rooms like this before, different country, different circumstances, but the same feeling, trapped. The door opened. A woman walked in, mid-40s, dark suit, badge clipped to her belt. Detective Laura Brennan. Grace recognized the type immediately. Career cop, sharp, no nonsense. The kind of person who didn't suffer fools. Brennan sat down across from her and set a folder on the table. Grace Sullivan, she said, registered nurse, employed at Riverside General for 6 years, no priors, clean record. She looked up. Until tonight. Grace didn't respond. Brennan opened the folder. You want to tell me what happened? I already told the officers. It's on my phone. I listened to the recording. Grace sat up straighter. Then I know you recorded a private conversation without consent, which, depending on the state, might be inadmissible in court. Grace's stomach sank. You're joking. I'm not. Did you hear what he said? He admitted to killing 12 people. What I heard, Brennan said slowly, was a fragmented conversation with no context. 2 men discussing medical procedures. Nothing definitive, nothing that proves intent. He said he's done it before, 12 times. He said a lot of things, but without corroboration, it's just words. Grace leaned forward. Then corroborate it. Pull his surgical records. Cross-reference patient deaths. You'll see the pattern. I can't do that without a warrant, and I can't get a warrant without probable cause. I just gave you probable cause. Brennan's expression didn't change. You gave me a recording of questionable legality and a story that sounds like paranoia. Grace wanted to flip the table. Instead, she forced herself to breathe. What about the vecuronium? She said. The tox screen came back positive. That's evidence. Evidence of what? That a paralytic was found in a patient's system during a medical emergency? That's not unusual, especially in a trauma setting. It is when the patient wasn't supposed to receive it. According to who? You? Grace clenched her fists. According to the dosage, according to the timing, according to the fact that he coded 30 seconds after Mercer injected him. Brennan tilted her head. Dr. Mercer says he was administering a standard cardiac medication, epinephrine, which is consistent with the treatment protocol. He's lying. Prove it. Grace stared at her. You're not going to investigate this, are you? Brennan closed the folder. I'm going to look into it. But right now, all I have is your word against a respected surgeon's. And your word comes with a history. What history? Military discharge, psychological evaluation, PTSD diagnosis. Grace's jaw tightened. That's sealed. Not for me. Then you know what happened in Kandahar. I know 11 soldiers died. I know you were the sole survivor. And I know you've been working under a false sense of security ever since. Brennan leaned back. I also know that trauma like that can make people see things that aren't there. Grace's hands shook. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were. But you're thinking it. Brennan didn't deny it. Grace stood. I want a lawyer. Sit down, Miss Sullivan. I want a lawyer. Now. Brennan sighed. You're not under arrest, not yet. But if you walk out of here, that changes. Grace sat. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out Grace's phone and slid it across the table. I'm going to give you a choice, she said. You can cooperate. Answer my questions. Help me understand what's really going on. Or you can lawyer up and I'll process you for assault, trespassing, and whatever else I can make stick. She paused. Your call. Grace looked at the phone, then at Brennan. What do you want to know? Everything. Grace talked for an hour. She told Brennan about Kandahar, about the field hospital, about the 11 soldiers who died 30 minutes after Mercer left. She told her about the vecuronium found in their systems, about the investigation that went nowhere, about the file that got buried. She told her about tonight, about the Admiral, about the IV line, about the recording. And when she was done, Brennan sat back and rubbed her eyes. "That's one hell of a story," she said. "It's not a story. It's the truth." "Maybe, but truth and proof are two different things." "Then get proof." "How?" Grace hesitated, then said, "There's someone who can help. Former military intelligence. He's been digging into Mercer's background." "Name?" "Marcus Reeves." Brennan wrote it down. "Where can I find him?" "I don't know. He's off the grid, but he'll call me." "When?" "Soon." Brennan didn't look convinced. "Miss Sullivan, I want to help you. I really do. But unless you can give me something concrete, something I can take to a judge, my hands are tied." Grace's phone buzzed. Both women looked at it. A text from an unknown number. "Get out. Now. They're coming for you." Grace's blood ran cold. Brennan frowned. "Who's that?" "Reeves." Another text. "Mercer made a call. You've got maybe 5 minutes. Trust no one in that building." Brennan reached for the phone. Grace pulled it back. "What does it say?" Brennan asked. Grace stood. "I need to leave. Sit down." "Detective, please." The door opened. 2 men in suits walked in. Federal agents. Grace could tell by the way they moved, the way they scanned the room. One of them looked at Brennan. "We'll take it from here, Detective." Brennan stood. "Excuse me?" "This is a federal matter now. We need to speak with Miss Sullivan, alone." "On whose authority?" The agent pulled out a badge. "Department of Defense, Office of Special Investigations." Brennan's expression tightened. "I'm in the middle of an interrogation." "Not anymore." The agent looked at Grace. "Miss Sullivan, you need to come with us." Grace didn't move. "Why?" "That's classified." "Then I'm not going anywhere." The second agent stepped closer. "Ma'am, this isn't a request." Grace's instincts screamed, "This is wrong. These aren't the good guys." She looked at Brennan. The detective looked just as confused. "I want to see a warrant," Grace said. The first agent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We don't need a warrant. You're a person of interest in a matter of national security." "What matter?" "That's classified." "Then how do I know you're telling the truth?" The agent's smile faded. "Because if you don't come with us willingly, we'll take you by force." Brennan stepped between them. "You're not taking anyone without proper documentation. I don't care who you work for." The agent looked at her. "Detective Brennan, badge number 4721, 15 years on the force, married, 2 kids, ages 9 and 12. He paused. "It would be a shame if something happened to compromise your career or your family." Brennan went pale. Grace felt her stomach twist. "You just threatened a police officer," Grace said. The agent shrugged. "I stated facts. What you choose to do with them is up to you." Brennan looked at Grace. There was something in her eyes, fear, but also resolve. "Don't go with them," Brennan said quietly. "Detective, I said don't go." The second agent reached for Grace's arm. Brennan moved faster. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and slammed him against the wall. The agent grunted, reached for his weapon, but Brennan was already drawing hers. "Hands where I can see them." The first agent didn't move. He just looked at Brennan like she was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're making a mistake, Detective." "Yeah, well, I've made worse." Brennan glanced at Grace. "There's a side exit, end of the hall. Take the stairs. Go." "What about you?" "I'll be fine. Move!" Grace ran. She burst through the door, sprinted down the hallway, and hit the stairwell at full speed. Behind her, she heard shouting. A gunshot. Grace's heart stopped. Brennan. She almost turned back, but then she heard footsteps, heavy, fast, coming up behind her. Grace kept running. She took the stairs 3 at a time, hit the ground floor, and shoved through the exit door. The night air hit her like a slap. She was in an alley behind the station. No lights, no people, just shadows. Grace ran. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, just kept moving, cutting through alleys, ducking behind dumpsters, staying out of sight. Her phone buzzed again. North parking garage, 3rd level, white sedan, keys under the mat. Go. Grace didn't question it. She ran 6 blocks, lungs burning, and found the garage. Took the stairs to the 3rd level. Spotted the sedan. White. Old. Unremarkable. She dropped to her knees, felt under the mat, and found the keys. Slid into the driver's seat. Started the engine. And then her phone rang. She answered. "Reeves? Drive south. Don't stop. Don't use your phone after this call. They're tracking you." "Who's tracking me?" "Everyone." Reeves's voice was tight. "Mercer didn't just make 1 call, Sullivan. He made a dozen. You just became the most wanted person in Virginia." "Why? What did I do?" "You threatened to expose a pipeline, a network, people in very high places who have a lot to lose." Grace merged onto the highway, keeping her speed steady. "What people?" "Defense contractors, senators, maybe higher. I don't know yet. But Mercer's not working alone. He never was." Grace's hands tightened on the wheel. "What about the Admiral?" "He's alive, for now. They moved him to a secure location." "Where?" "I can't tell you that, but he's safe. For the moment." "And Brennan?" A pause. "I don't know." Grace's chest tightened. "Reeves, I'll find out, but right now you need to focus on staying alive." "Where am I going?" "There's a motel off Route 17, the Night Owl. Room 12. Keys in the glove box. Ditch the car 2 blocks away and walk. Don't talk to anyone. Don't use your credit cards. And for the love of God, don't trust anyone who says they're here to help." "What about you?" "I'll contact you when it's safe." The line went dead. Grace drove for another 20 minutes, then ditched the car in a Walmart parking lot. She walked the rest of the way, keeping her head down, hands in her pockets. The Night Owl was exactly what it sounded like. Run down. Neon sign flickering. The kind of place where no one asked questions. Grace found room 12, used the key, locked the door behind her. The room smelled like cigarettes and regret. 1 bed, 1 chair. A TV bolted to the wall. Grace sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't look. But she did. Another text. Different number. "They know where you are. Move. Now." Grace's heart stopped. She stood, grabbed the key, and moved toward the door. Before she could reach it, the window exploded. Glass shattered. Grace hit the floor. A canister rolled across the carpet, hissing. Smoke. Grace covered her mouth, tried to stand, but her vision blurred. The door kicked open. 3 figures in tactical gear stormed in. Grace tried to fight, tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. One of the figures leaned down, face obscured by a gas mask. "Gotcha," a muffled voice said. Then everything went black. Grace woke to the sound of water dripping. Her head throbbed. Her wrists burned. She tried to move, but her arms were yanked back. Zip ties. Tight. Cutting into her skin. She blinked, trying to focus. She was in a basement. Concrete walls. Single bulb hanging from the ceiling. A metal chair beneath her. And across from her, leaning against the wall, was the man in the gray suit from the hospital. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Welcome back, Miss Sullivan," he said. Grace's voice came out hoarse. "Who are you?" "That's not important." "Where am I?" "Somewhere no one will find you." Grace tested the zip ties. They didn't budge. The man pushed off the wall and walked closer. "You've caused a lot of problems tonight." "Good." He crouched down in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Dr. Mercer wanted to handle this quietly, but you just couldn't let it go, could you?" "He killed 11 soldiers. 12, actually. You keep forgetting the Admiral. He's not dead." The man smiled. "Not yet." Grace lunged forward, but the chair was bolted to the floor. The man didn't flinch. "You're going to tell us everything you know," he said. "Who you talked to, what you told them, where the files are." "What files?" "The ones from Kandahar, the ones you stole before the airstrike." Grace went still. "He thinks I have proof. He thinks I took something." She hadn't, but he didn't know that. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. The man stood. "Then we'll find out the hard way." He turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Grace said. He stopped. "If you're going to kill me anyway, at least tell me why. Why Kandahar? Why the Admiral? What's the point?" The man looked back at her. The point, Miss Sullivan, is control, money, power, the things that make the world turn. He paused. Your soldiers were casualties of progress. The Admiral is a loose end. And you? He smiled. You're just in the way. The door opened, and Nathan Mercer walked in. He looked exactly the same as he had in the hospital, calm, composed, in control. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from Grace. Hello again, he said. Grace didn't respond. Mercer clasped his hands. I want you to understand something. This isn't personal. It never was. You killed my team. I did what I was paid to do. You're a doctor. You're supposed to save lives. I save the lives that matter. Mercer leaned forward. Your team was a liability. They saw something they shouldn't have. A shipment, a transaction, details that would have compromised a very lucrative operation. So you murdered them. I eliminated a threat. He paused. Just like I'm going to eliminate you. Grace's pulse hammered. People know. Reeves knows. The detective knows. You can't kill all of us. Can I? Mercer smiled. Detective Brennan is already being discredited, a rogue cop who assaulted federal agents. Her testimony won't hold up. As for Reeves, he shrugged. We'll find him eventually. And me? You'll disappear. A tragic suicide, perhaps. Or maybe an accident. We haven't decided yet. Grace forced herself to stay calm. You won't get away with this. I already have. Mercer stood, and that's when Grace heard it. A sound, faint, distant. Footsteps. Multiple. Heavy. Mercer frowned. What? The door exploded inward. Tactical team. Black uniforms. Rifles raised. Hands up! Now! The man in the gray suit reached for his weapon. He didn't make it. 3 shots. Center mass. He dropped. Mercer raised his hands, backing away. There's been a mistake. On the ground! Face down! He complied. The team swept the room, cleared the corners, secured the exits. And then a figure walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform Grace hadn't seen in 6 years. U.S. Navy. Captain's bars. He looked at her, and she knew that face. Marcus Reeves, Grace breathed. Reeves smiled. Hey, Sullivan, miss me? Reeves crossed the room in 3 strides and cut the zip ties with a tactical knife. Grace's arms dropped, numb and screaming with pins and needles. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Reeves caught her before she hit the concrete. Easy, he said. You've been out for 4 hours. Grace blinked, trying to process. 4 hours? Give or take. Reeves helped her into a standing position, keeping one hand on her elbow. Can you walk? She tested her weight. Her ankles held, barely. Yeah. Good. Because we need to move. One of the tactical operators zip-tied Mercer's wrists behind his back and hauled him to his feet. The doctor's face had gone pale, but he wasn't struggling, just watching, calculating. Grace looked at Reeves. Really looked at him. The uniform was crisp. The insignia real. Captain's bars gleaming under the single bulb. You're Navy, she said. Was. Reinstated 2 days ago. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure it would go through. Reeves gestured to the team. And I needed leverage to make this happen. Grace glanced at Mercer, then back at Reeves. What is this? What's happening? Justice, Reeves said. Finally. One of the operators spoke into his radio. Package secured. Extract in 3 minutes. Reeves nodded, then turned to Grace. We don't have much time. The people Mercer works for know we're here. They're scrambling to contain this before it goes public. Who are they? I'll explain on the way. Right now, we need to get you and Mercer out of here alive. Grace looked at Mercer. He was staring at her with that same calm expression, like none of this mattered. Where's the Admiral? She asked. Safe, Reeves said. Walter Reed, highest security wing. He's awake. Grace's chest loosened. He's alive? Because of you. Reeves squeezed her shoulder. You saved him, Sullivan. Twice. Before Grace could respond, the operator by the door raised his fist. Movement outside, 2 vehicles, armed. Reeves' expression hardened. How many? 6, maybe 8. Hostile? Assume yes. Reeves turned to his team. Perimeter defense, suppressive fire only. We're not here to start a war. The operators moved into position, weapons trained on the exits. Reeves pulled a sidearm from his belt and handed it to Grace. You remember how to use this? Grace checked the magazine. Full. 15 rounds. Yeah. Good. Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you go for the exit. Don't look back. What about you? I'll be right behind you. He wasn't lying well. Grace could see it in his eyes. He was planning to stay, to cover their retreat. Reeves. Not now, Sullivan. The sound of engines cut through the air, tires on gravel, doors slamming, then silence. Grace's pulse hammered in her ears. One of the operators whispered into his radio. Target count confirmed. 8 hostiles, armed with rifles, no uniforms, private contractors. Reeves swore under his breath. Mercer laughed. Everyone turned to look at him. You think this ends here? Mercer said. His voice was steady, almost amused. You think dragging me out of this basement changes anything? Shut up, Reeves said. They'll kill all of you before you reach the street, and even if you make it out, they'll bury this so deep, no one will ever find it. Mercer's smile widened. You can't win. You never could. Grace stepped forward and hit him. Not a slap, a punch, closed fist, right across the jaw. Mercer's head snapped to the side. Blood trickled from his lip. He spit, then looked back at her, still smiling. Feel better? He asked. Grace raised her fist again. Reeves grabbed her wrist. Don't. He's not worth it. He killed 11 people. 12, Mercer corrected. Don't forget the Admiral. He's alive. For now. Grace lunged, but Reeves pulled her back. Sullivan, stand down. She shook him off, breathing hard. He needs to pay. He will, but not like this. Outside, a voice boomed through a megaphone. This is private property. You are trespassing. Exit the building with your hands up, or we will use force. One of the operators glanced at Reeves. Orders? Reeves looked at Grace, then at Mercer, then at the door. We negotiate, he said. Negotiate? Grace stared at him. You can't be serious, Tate. I'm serious. We're outgunned and trapped. If we fight, people die. Maybe us, maybe them. Either way, this turns into a bloodbath, and the story gets buried. So what's the alternative? We trade. Reeves looked at Mercer. Him for safe passage. Mercer raised an eyebrow. You think they'll go for that? They want you alive more than they want us dead. You're the linchpin. Without you, their whole operation unravels. Or they kill all of you and pin it on me. Mercer shrugged. Either way, I'm dead. So why would I cooperate? Because you're a survivor, Reeves said. You've been playing this game for years. You know how to work the angles. And right now, your best angle is staying alive long enough to cut a deal. Mercer considered this. What kind of deal? Immunity. Witness protection. A new life somewhere far away from here. In exchange for what? Everything. Names, dates, locations, the whole network. Mercer laughed. You're insane. Maybe, but it's your only option. Outside, the voice came again. You have 60 seconds. Come out now or we're coming in. Reeves looked at his team. Opinions? The lead operator, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek, shook his head. We can hold them off for maybe 5 minutes. After that, we're out of ammo and options. What about extraction? Chopper's 20 minutes out. We called it in before we breached. 20 minutes is a lifetime. I know. Reeves turned back to Mercer. Last chance. You cooperate or I let them have you. Mercer's smile faded. For the first time, Grace saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. Fine, Mercer said. I'll talk. Reeves nodded to the operator. Open the door, hands up, no sudden moves. The operator moved to the door, unlocked it, and pushed it open slowly. Blinding light flooded the basement. Grace squinted, raising a hand to shield her eyes. Through the glare, she could make out silhouettes. 8 men. Rifles raised, tactical positions. The voice came again, closer now. Step out, slowly. Reeves went first, hands raised, weapon holstered. Grace followed, heart hammering, the sidearm tucked into the back of her waistband. The operators came next, weapons lowered but ready. And finally Mercer, hands zip-tied, blood still dripping from his lip. The moment they stepped outside, the rifles tracked them. Red laser dots danced across their chests. Grace forced herself to breathe. The man with the megaphone stepped forward. He was older, gray hair, expensive suit under a tactical vest, the kind of man who gave orders and expected them to be followed. "Captain Reeves," the man said, "you're making a mistake." "I don't think so. You're interfering with a classified operation." "What operation? The one where you murder veterans and cover it up?" The man's expression didn't change. "You don't understand what's at stake here." "Then explain it to me." "I can't. It's above your pay grade." "Try me," the man sighed. "Dr. Mercer is a valuable asset. He's under federal protection. What you're doing right now is kidnapping." "Funny," Reeves said, "because what he's been doing is murder. Alleged murder, which will be investigated through proper channels." "Proper channels?" Grace stepped forward. "You mean the same channels that buried Kandahar? The same channels that let him kill 12 people?" The man's eyes flicked to her. "Miss Sullivan, you've had a difficult night. I suggest you step back and let the professionals handle this." "I am a professional." "You're a nurse, and a traumatized one at that." Grace's jaw tightened. "I'm the only reason the Admiral is still alive." "The Admiral is alive because of excellent medical care, not because of you." "I was there. I saw what Mercer did." "You saw what you wanted to see." The man turned back to Reeves. "Captain, I'm going to give you one chance to walk away. Hand over Dr. Mercer, and we'll forget this ever happened." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll be court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, and prosecuted for treason." Reeves didn't blink. "Do your worst." The man's expression hardened. "You're willing to throw away your career for this?" "I'm willing to do what's right." "Right and wrong are luxuries, Captain. In the real world, there are only consequences." "Then I'll live with them." The man raised his hand. The rifles tracked higher. Grace's pulse spiked. She reached for the sidearm, but Reeves caught her wrist. "Not yet," he whispered. "Reeves, trust me." The man's hand started to drop, and then a new sound cut through the night. Rotors. Everyone looked up. A helicopter appeared over the tree line. Black, unmarked, spotlight blazing. The man lowered his hand, his face twisting in confusion. "What the—" The chopper descended fast, kicking up dust and debris. The side door slid open and a figure appeared. Grace's breath caught. It was the Admiral. Richard Calloway stood in the doorway of the helicopter, one hand gripping the frame, the other holding a satellite phone. He was pale, weak, an IV line still taped to his arm. But he was alive, and he was furious. The helicopter's loudspeaker crackled to life. "This is Admiral Richard Calloway. Stand down. Immediately." The man in the suit froze. "Admiral, you're supposed to be in a hospital bed?" "Yeah, well, I got bored." Calloway's voice was rough but steady. "Lower your weapons, now." The contractors hesitated. "That's an order." Slowly, the rifles lowered. The man in the suit looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Admiral, with all due respect, you don't have authority here. I have a direct line to the Secretary of Defense and the President. Want to test me?" The man didn't respond. Calloway stepped down from the helicopter, moving carefully. One of the crew members tried to help him, but he waved them off. He walked toward Reeves, each step deliberate. When he reached them, he looked at Grace. "You're the nurse," he said. Grace nodded. "You saved my life." "I did my job." "No." Calloway's voice was firm. "You did more than that. You stood up when no one else would. You fought when everyone told you to stop." He paused. "And you were right." Grace's throat tightened. Calloway turned to Mercer. "Dr. Mercer, you tried to kill me." Mercer said nothing. "You injected me with vecuronium. You tampered with my IV, and you would have succeeded if this woman hadn't intervened." Calloway stepped closer. "I remember. All of it." Mercer's face went pale. "I was conscious," Calloway continued, "paralyzed but conscious. I heard every word you said, every lie you told, every order you gave." He looked at the man in the suit. "And I know who sent you." The man's jaw tightened. "Admiral, you're mistaken." "Am I?" "Because I have recordings, video, audio, everything." Calloway held up the satellite phone. and in about 30 seconds, it's all going to be uploaded to a secure server, along with the names of everyone involved. The man's hand moved toward his weapon. Calloway didn't flinch. Do it. Pull that trigger. See what happens. The man hesitated. You'll be dead before you hit the ground, Calloway said, and the story will still go public. Your choice. The man's hand dropped. Calloway turned to Reeves. Captain, take Dr. Mercer into custody. I want him transported to Walter Reed, maximum security. No visitors, no calls, no exceptions. Reeves nodded. Yes, sir. Two of the operators grabbed Mercer and dragged him toward the helicopter. Calloway looked at the man in the suit. As for you, I suggest you make some phone calls, because when this breaks, you're going to need a very good lawyer. The man said nothing. Calloway turned and walked back toward the helicopter. Halfway there, he stumbled. Grace moved without thinking, catching his arm. I've got you, she said. Calloway looked at her. Thank you. They made it to the helicopter together. The crew helped him inside. Grace started to step back, but Calloway grabbed her wrist. Come with me, he said. What? You're not safe here. None of us are. Not yet. Grace glanced at Reeves. He nodded. She climbed into the helicopter. The rotors spun faster. The aircraft lifted off, leaving the contractors and the man in the suit standing in the dust. Grace watched them shrink below, her heart still hammering. Reeves sat across from her, arms crossed. You okay? No, Grace said, but I will be. The helicopter banked hard, heading east, toward Washington, toward answers. Calloway leaned back against the bulkhead, eyes closed. When we land, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of pressure. They're going to try to spin this, bury it, make it go away. Let them try, Grace said. Calloway opened his eyes. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, but I'm done running. Reeves leaned forward. We have the recordings, we have Mercer, and we have you, Admiral. That's enough to blow this wide open. Maybe, Calloway said, but the people we're up against don't play fair. They'll come after us, all of us. Then we hit them first, Grace said. Calloway smiled. I like her. Reeves grinned. Yeah, me too. The helicopter flew on, cutting through the night. Grace looked out the window. Below, the lights of Richmond faded into darkness. Somewhere down there, people were making calls, pulling strings, trying to stop what was coming. But they were too late. The truth was already out, and Grace wasn't going to let anyone bury it again. They landed at Joint Base Andrews 40 minutes later. Military police were waiting, so were federal agents, and reporters. Grace stepped off the helicopter into a storm of camera flashes and shouted questions. Miss Sullivan, is it true you prevented an assassination? Did Dr. Mercer confess? What can you tell us about Kandahar? Reeves and the operators formed a barrier, pushing through the crowd. Grace kept her head down, following Calloway as he was loaded onto a stretcher. I'm fine, he protested. I can walk. Sir, you just flatlined 6 hours ago, one of the medics said. You're not walking anywhere. Calloway grumbled, but didn't fight. They wheeled him toward a waiting ambulance. Grace started to follow, but a hand grabbed her arm. She spun, ready to fight. It was Detective Brennan. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen, but she was alive. Brennan, Grace breathed. You're okay. Barely. Brennan winced. Those federal agents weren't happy when I didn't cooperate. What happened? They tried to take me into custody. I resisted. Things got ugly. Brennan glanced around. But then the Admiral made his call. Suddenly, everyone backed off. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. You didn't drag me into anything. I made a choice. Brennan squeezed her arm. And I'd make it again. Grace felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. I know. Brennan handed her a card. That's my direct line. If you need anything, and I mean anything, call me. Grace pocketed the card. I will. Brennan nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Reeves appeared at Grace's side. Come on, they want us inside. Who's they? Everyone. He led her through a side entrance, past security checkpoints, and into a secure briefing room. The walls were lined with screens, maps, data. A dozen people in suits and uniforms milled around, talking in low voices. At the head of the table sat a woman in her 50s. Gray hair, sharp eyes. A name placard in front of her read, Senator Diane Marsh. She looked up as Grace entered. Miss Sullivan, please, sit. Grace sat. Marsh folded her hands. I'm going to be direct. What you've done tonight has created a significant problem. Grace's jaw tightened. I stopped a murder. You exposed a classified operation. A classified operation that involved killing American soldiers. Marsh's expression didn't change. That's one interpretation. It's the truth. Truth is subjective, Miss Sullivan. What matters now is damage control. Grace stood. Are you kidding me? You're worried about damage control? Mercer killed 12 people, maybe more, and you want to sweep it under the rug. I want to prevent a national security crisis. Then prosecute him publicly. Let the world see what he did. Marsh sighed. It's not that simple. It is that simple. No, it's not. Marsh leaned forward. Dr. Mercer wasn't acting alone. He was part of a network, a pipeline that funneled money and resources through defense contracts. If we prosecute him publicly, the entire system collapses, and a lot of people, powerful people, go down with it. Good. You don't understand. If this goes public, it destabilizes relationships, breaks alliances, weakens our position on the global stage. Grace stared at her. So you're just going to let him walk? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? Marsh stood. I'm saying we need to be strategic. We prosecute Mercer, but quietly. A closed trial, sealed records. He goes to prison for the rest of his life, but the network stays intact. That's not justice. It's the best we can do. Grace shook her head. No, I didn't risk my life for a backroom deal. I want a real trial, public, transparent, everything on the record. Marsh's eyes hardened. That's not your decision. Then whose is it? A voice from the doorway cut through the room. Mine. Everyone turned. Admiral Calloway stood in the doorway, still in his hospital gown, IV pole in hand. Admiral, Marsh said, you should be resting. I've rested enough. Calloway walked into the room, each step slow but deliberate. Miss Sullivan is right. This needs to be public. That's not possible. It is if I make it possible. Calloway sat down at the table. I outrank most of the people in this room, and I have direct access to the president. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to prosecute Mercer, publicly. We're going to expose the network, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may. Marsh's face flushed. You'll destroy careers, ruin lives. Good. Because those careers were built on corruption, and those lives were built on lies. Calloway looked at Grace. This woman saved my life, and she deserves to see justice done. Real justice. Not some sanitized version designed to protect the guilty. Marsh stood. Admiral, I'm asking you to reconsider. And I'm telling you no. Marsh's jaw tightened. She grabbed her briefcase and headed for the door. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Calloway said. The door slammed shut. The room went silent. Grace looked at Calloway. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The fight's just starting. Reeves stepped forward. What's the plan? Calloway leaned back. We go public. Press conference, tomorrow morning. We lay out everything. Kandahar, the murders, the network, all of it. They'll come after us, Reeves said. Let them. I'm done playing defense. Grace felt something shift in her chest. A weight lifting. For the first time in 6 years, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground. The press conference was scheduled for 900 hours. Grace didn't sleep. She spent the night in a secure room at Walter Reed, going over her testimony with Reeves and a team of military lawyers. They prepped her for questions, coached her on what to say, what not to say. But Grace didn't need coaching. She knew exactly what she was going to say. At 08:45 hours, they moved her to a holding area behind the press room. She could hear the murmur of voices on the other side of the wall. Reporters, cameras, the whole world waiting. Reeves appeared at her side. You ready? Grace looked at him. Are you? I've been ready for 6 years. Me too. The door opened. An aide gestured. 5 minutes. Grace took a breath. This was it. She walked toward the stage, heart hammering, but her steps steady. Calloway was already there, seated at the center table. Reeves sat beside him. Grace took the seat on the other side. The lights were blinding. The cameras pointed at them like weapons. An aide stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Richard Calloway." Calloway stood, slowly. His hands gripped the edges of the podium. "Good morning," he said. "I'm here today to tell you about a betrayal, a conspiracy, and a cover-up that has lasted for over 6 years." The room went silent. Calloway continued. "In 2018, 11 American soldiers were killed in Kandahar. The official report called it an accident, a miscommunication. But that was a lie." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Those soldiers were murdered, poisoned by a man they trusted, a doctor named Nathan Mercer, and last night he tried to do the same thing to me." The murmurs grew louder. Calloway raised his hand. "I'm alive today because of one person, a nurse named Grace Sullivan. She saw what others refused to see. She fought when others told her to stop, and she saved my life." All eyes turned to Grace. She didn't move. Calloway continued. "Miss Sullivan will now share her testimony." Grace stood, walked to the podium. The lights were hotter than she expected. The silence heavier. She looked out at the sea of faces, and she spoke. "My name is Grace Sullivan. 6 years ago, I was a combat medic stationed in Kandahar. I watched 11 soldiers die because a doctor named Nathan Mercer poisoned them. And last night, I watched him try to kill Admiral Calloway the same way." The room exploded with questions. Grace raised her voice. "I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to tell the truth. The whole truth, no matter who it implicates, no matter who it destroys." She pulled out a USB drive and held it up. "This contains recordings, medical records, financial transactions, everything you need to know about the network that enabled these murders. And I'm releasing it, right now, to every news outlet in this room." She handed the drive to the aide. The room erupted. Calloway stood. "That's all for now, thank you." They walked off the stage together. Behind them, the chaos grew. Grace felt Reeves' hand on her shoulder. "You just declared war." "I know. They're going to come after you, hard. Let them." Reeves smiled. "You've changed." "No," Grace said. "I just stopped pretending." They exited through a side door. Security surrounded them immediately. But before they could move, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the man in the gray suit. He was alive, and he was holding a gun. "You should have taken the deal," he said, and he fired. The shot went wide. Grace felt the bullet punch through the air 6 inches from her head. She hit the ground, instinct taking over, and rolled behind a concrete pillar. Reeves was already moving, weapon drawn, returning fire. 2 rounds. Center mass. The man in the gray suit staggered back, his gun clattering to the floor. He clutched his chest, eyes wide with shock, and dropped to his knees. Security swarmed in from every direction, weapons raised, shouts overlapping. "Shoot her down! Secure the area! Get the Admiral inside, now!" Calloway was already being dragged back through the door by 2 agents. He fought them, trying to turn back, but they had him in a grip that wasn't negotiable. Grace stayed behind the pillar, breathing hard, hands shaking. Reeves crouched beside her, scanning the corridor. "You hit?" he asked. "No." "You sure?" Grace checked herself. No blood, no pain, just adrenaline screaming through her veins. "I'm sure." Reeves helped her up. The man in the gray suit was face down now, surrounded by tactical operators. One of them kicked the gun away. Another checked for a pulse. "He's alive," the operator said. "Barely." Reeves holstered his weapon and turned to Grace. "We need to move. If he got through security, there could be others." Grace nodded. Her ears were still ringing from the gunshot. Everything felt muted, distant. They moved quickly through the corridor, flanked by armed guards. Behind them, medics were already working on the shooter. Grace didn't look back. They reached a secure room 3 floors down. Reinforced walls. No windows. A single door with a biometric lock. Reeves shut the door behind them and locked it. "Sit." Grace sat. Her legs felt like rubber. Reeves poured a glass of water from a pitcher on the table and handed it to her. "Drink." She drank. The water was cold. It helped. Reeves sat across from her. "That was too close." "I know." He shouldn't have gotten within 100 yards of you. But he did. Reeves ran a hand through his hair. This is bigger than we thought. Someone inside fed him your location, your schedule, everything. Who? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The door opened. Calloway walked in, flanked by 2 agents. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. Are you hurt? He asked Grace. No, sir. Calloway exhaled. Good. He turned to Reeves. The shooter? Stable. They're prepping him for interrogation. I want answers, fast. You'll have them. Calloway sat down heavily. The IV pole was gone, but the tape marks were still visible on his arm. This was a hit. Professional. Someone wanted to send a message. They failed, Grace said. This time. Calloway looked at her. But they'll try again. You know that, right? Grace nodded. I'm not backing down. I didn't think you would. But Calloway leaned back. The press conference worked. The footage is already circulating. Every major network is covering it. The USB drive is being analyzed, and Mercer's in custody. What about Senator Marsh? Reeves asked. Calloway's expression darkened. She's furious, threatening lawsuits, claiming we violated protocol. But she can't stop this, not anymore. She'll try, Grace said. Let her. Calloway stood. We have momentum, public opinion, and the truth. That's more than enough. One of the agents stepped forward. Admiral, we need to move you to a more secure location. Not yet. I'm not leaving until I know what's happening with the shooter. Sir, the threat level is... I don't care about the threat level. I care about answers. The agent hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. Calloway turned back to Grace and Reeves. I want both of you in the interrogation. You've earned the right to hear what he has to say. Reeves stood. When? Now. The interrogation room was small. White walls, metal table, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner recording everything. The man in the gray suit sat on one side, wrists cuffed to the table. His chest was bandaged, his face gray with pain. A medic stood in the corner, monitoring his vitals. Grace, Reeves, and Calloway stood behind a one-way mirror, watching. A federal agent walked into the room and sat across from the man. He opened a folder and laid out several photos. Grace recognized them. The basement, the hospital, Kandahar. Let's start simple, the agent said. What's your name? The man said nothing. Okay. How about this? Who hired you? Still nothing. The agent leaned back. You're looking at attempted murder of a flag officer, assault on federal property, conspiracy. That's life in prison. Minimum. The man smiled faintly. Blood stained his teeth. I'm already dead. Not yet, but you could be. Depends on how this goes. I'm not talking. Then you're useless. The man's smile widened. You think I'm the only one? You think killing me stops anything? The agent didn't respond. The man leaned forward, chains rattling. There are 10 more like me, 20, 100. You exposed the pipeline. You humiliated people with power, and now they're coming for all of you. Grace felt her stomach twist. The agent stood. We'll see about that. He walked out. Behind the glass, Calloway's jaw tightened. He's not bluffing. No, Reeves said. He's not. Grace looked at the man through the glass. He was staring directly at the mirror, like he could see her. They're going to keep coming, she said quietly. Then we keep fighting, Calloway replied. The door to the observation room opened. A woman in a dark suit entered. Tall, cold eyes, badge on her belt. Admiral Calloway, she said. I'm Special Agent Kira Lennox. FBI Counterterrorism. Calloway turned. What do you want? To help. My team has been tracking the network for 2 years. What you've done tonight accelerated everything. Accelerated how? You forced them into the open. They're scrambling, making mistakes, and we're ready to capitalize. Reeves crossed his arms. Why should we trust you? Lennox looked at him. Because I've lost people to this network. Good agents, and I want them to burn just as much as you do. Grace studied her. There was no warmth in her expression, just cold calculation. But there was truth there, too. What do you need from us? Calloway asked. Access to your files, your recordings, everything you have. You'll have it. Lennox nodded. Good, because we're moving fast. Warrants are already being issued, raids are being coordinated. By tomorrow morning, we'll have 12 people in custody. Including who? Lennox pulled out a tablet and swiped through a list. Senator Marsh, 3 defense contractors, 2 DoD officials, and a retired general. Grace's breath caught. A general? Brigadier General Paul Hargrove. Retired. He's been running the financial side of the operation for years. Reeves swore under his breath. Hargrove? He's a legend. He's a criminal, Lennox said flatly. And tomorrow, the world will know it. Calloway looked at the man in the interrogation room. What about him? He's small fish. But he'll talk eventually. They always do. And if he doesn't? Lennox's expression didn't change. Then he dies in a cell. Either way, he's done. She turned and walked out. Grace looked at Reeves. Do you trust her? I don't trust anyone right now. Reeves glanced at Calloway. But she's right about one thing. We need to move fast. Calloway nodded. Agreed. Let's get back to work. Okay. The raid started at 0600 hours. Grace watched them unfold on a live feed from the FBI command center. Agents in tactical gear stormed homes, offices, secure facilities. Doors kicked in, weapons drawn, people dragged out in handcuffs. Senator Marsh was arrested in her Georgetown townhouse. She screamed at the agents, threatened lawsuits, demanded to speak to the Attorney General. They ignored her. General Hargrove was taken from his estate in Virginia. He didn't resist, just stood there, hands raised, face expressionless. The defense contractors were pulled from their offices mid-meeting. One of them tried to run. He didn't make it 10 feet. Grace watched it all from a monitor in the command center. Lennox stood beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. How many total? Grace asked. 18 so far. We're still processing warrants for another 12. And Mercer? Still in custody? Maximum security? He's not going anywhere. Grace nodded. Her chest felt tight. This was real. It was actually happening. Reeves appeared at her side. You okay? Yeah, just processing. It's a lot. It is. Calloway walked over, moving slower now. The adrenaline from the press conference had worn off, and exhaustion was setting in. The media is going insane. Every network is covering the arrests. The president just released a statement. What did he say? Grace asked. That justice will be served, that no one is above the law, the usual. Calloway smiled faintly. But he means it this time. Too much public pressure to sweep this under the rug. Lennox turned to them. We need you 3 to give formal depositions. Everything you know, everything you saw. It'll be used in the trials. When? Reeves asked. Today, now. We're building the cases as we speak. Grace took a breath. Let's do it. The depositions took hours. Grace sat in a small room with 2 federal prosecutors and a court reporter. They asked her everything: Kandahar, the hospital, the basement, the recordings. She answered every question, didn't hold back. When it was over, one of the prosecutors, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, leaned back and closed her folder. That's enough for now, she said. Thank you, Miss Sullivan. Grace stood. What happens next? We file charges, lots of them. Conspiracy, murder, fraud, treason. This is going to be the biggest prosecution in decades. How long until trial? Months, maybe longer. These things take time. Grace nodded. And Mercer? He's the centerpiece. We're building a case that's airtight. He's not walking away from this. Good. The prosecutor stood and extended her hand. You did the right thing. Not many people would have. Grace shook it. I didn't have a choice. Yes, you did. And you chose justice. That matters. Grace left the room and found Reeves waiting in the hallway. How'd it go? He asked. Long, thorough, but done. Same. Reeves gestured down the hall. Calloway's wrapping up now. We're supposed to meet him in conference room B. They walked together, navigating the maze of corridors in the FBI building. Grace felt drained, empty, like she'd given everything she had and there was nothing left. But there was one more thing, one more piece. They reached the conference room. Calloway was already there, sitting at the head of the table. Lennox stood beside him, tablet in hand. "Sit," Calloway said. Grace and Reeves sat. Lennox swiped through her tablet. "We've been analyzing the financial records, tracing the money, and we found something." "What?" Grace asked. "The network wasn't just about killing witnesses, it was about protecting a contract, a massive defense contract worth $4.7 billion. Reeves leaned forward. "For what?" "A weapons system, classified. Contracted to a company called Apex Dynamics. They've been developing it for years, but the project was built on fraudulent data, faked test results, bribed inspectors. The whole thing's a house of cards." "And the soldiers in Kandahar?" Grace asked. "They stumbled onto a shipment, part of the weapons system being moved through Afghanistan. They saw too much, asked too many questions, so Mercer was brought in to silence them." Grace felt sick. "They died because of a weapons contract?" "They died because they were inconvenient," Lennox said. "And so was Admiral Calloway. He was scheduled to testify before Congress about defense spending. If he'd lived long enough to talk, the whole thing would have unraveled." Calloway's jaw tightened. "So they tried to kill me?" "Yes." Grace looked at Lennox. "What about Apex Dynamics? Are they being charged?" "The entire executive board, CEO, CFO, all of them." Lennox turned the tablet around, showing a list of names. "We're dismantling the company, seizing assets. This is total scorched earth." Reeves smiled. "Good." Calloway stood. "I want to see Mercer." Lennox frowned. "Sir, that's not... I want to see him. Now." Lennox hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it." They brought Mercer into an interrogation room at Walter Reed. He was in an orange jumpsuit, hands and feet shackled. 2 guards stood behind him. Grace, Reeves, and Calloway sat across from him. Mercer looked tired, older, but his eyes were still sharp. "Admiral," he said, "you're looking well, considering." Calloway didn't respond. Mercer shifted his gaze to Grace. "And you? The nurse who wouldn't quit." Grace stared at him. "You killed 11 soldiers." 12, if you count the Admiral." Mercer smiled faintly. "Oh, wait. He survived. My mistake." Calloway leaned forward. "Why?" Mercer tilted his head. "Why what?" "Why did you do it? The money, the contract." "Both. And because I could." Mercer's smile faded. "You think you're the first person to ask me that question? You're not, and you won't be the last." "You're going to prison for the rest of your life," Calloway said. "Maybe. Or maybe I cut a deal, testify against the others, get a reduced sentence." "There's no deal, not for you," Mercer laughed. "You don't get it. I'm valuable. I know things. Names, dates, operations you don't even know exist. They'll offer me a deal. They always do." Grace stood. "You're wrong." Mercer looked at her. "Am I?" "Yeah. Because this time, you're not valuable. You're just a murderer, and the world knows it." Mercer's smile vanished. Grace leaned forward. "You tried to make me disappear. Tried to make all of us disappear. But we didn't. We're still here. And you're the one who's gone." Mercer said nothing. Calloway stood. "We're done here." They walked out. Behind them, Mercer sat in silence, shackled and alone. 3 weeks later, Grace stood in Arlington National Cemetery. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rows of white headstones. Reeves stood beside her. Calloway was a few feet away, speaking quietly with a uniformed officer. They were here for a ceremony. 11 headstones, 11 names, the soldiers from Kandahar. For 6 years, their deaths had been classified, their names erased. Their families told it was an accident, but now the truth was public, and their names were being restored. A chaplain stood at the front, reading from a prepared statement. Grace didn't hear the words. She was too focused on the stones. PFC Marcus Tully, SGT Vanessa Cole, CPL James Rivera. The names she'd carried for 6 years, the weight she'd never been able to put down. The ceremony ended. The families approached the headstones, some crying, some silent. Grace stayed back, watching. A woman in her 60s walked over, gray hair, kind eyes. She stopped in front of Grace. "You're Grace Sullivan," the woman said. Grace nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Marcus Tully's mother." Grace's breath caught. "Mrs. Tully, I'm so sorry." The woman raised a hand. "Don't. You have nothing to apologize for." "I couldn't save him." "But you didn't forget him, and you fought for him, even when no one else would." Mrs. Tully's voice broke. "That means everything." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. "He was a good soldier." "He was a good son, Mrs." Tully reached out and squeezed Grace's hand. "Thank you for bringing him home." Grace couldn't speak. She just nodded. Mrs. Tully walked back to the headstone. Reeves appeared at Grace's side. "You okay?" Grace wiped her eyes. "Yeah, I think I am." Calloway joined them. "The trials start next month. Mercer, Marsh, Hargrove, all of them." "Will you testify?" Grace asked. "Every day if I have to." Calloway looked at her. "What about you?" Grace looked at the headstones, then back at Calloway. "I'll be there." The trials were brutal. Months of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. Grace sat in the witness box for 3 days, recounting everything. Kandahar. The hospital, the recordings. Mercer's lawyers tried to break her, tried to paint her as unstable, traumatized, unreliable. But the evidence was too strong. The recordings, the medical records, the financial trails. It all pointed to one conclusion: guilty. Senator Marsh was convicted of conspiracy and fraud, 15 years. General Hargrove was convicted of treason. Life without parole. The Apex Dynamics executives were convicted on multiple counts, sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years. And Nathan Mercer, 12 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder of a flag officer, conspiracy, treason. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, life in prison, no parole. Grace sat in the courtroom as the judge read the verdict. She didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel relief, just tired. It was over. 6 months after the trials, Grace stood outside Riverside General Hospital. She hadn't been back since the night she was suspended. But today, she was here for a reason. The hospital director, a new one, appointed after the previous director was arrested for obstruction, had called her, asked her to come in. Grace walked through the front doors and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The director's office was at the end of the hall. She knocked. "Come in." Grace opened the door. The director, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Elena Voss, stood and extended her hand. "Miss Sullivan, thank you for coming." Grace shook it. "What's this about?" Dr. Voss gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Grace sat. Dr. Voss sat across from her. "I'll be direct. We want you to come back." Grace blinked. "What?" "We want to reinstate you. Full benefits, back pay, and a promotion." Grace stared at her. "You fired me. The previous administration fired you, wrongly, and we want to make it right." Grace shook her head. "I don't know if I can." "I understand, but we need people like you, people who stand up, who do the right thing, even when it's hard." Grace looked down at her hands. "I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago." "Good. Because the hospital isn't the same either. We're rebuilding, new protocols, new oversight, and we need your expertise." Grace looked up. "What would the job be?" "Head of trauma nursing. You'd oversee the entire department." Grace felt her chest tighten. "That's a big job." "You've already proven you can handle it." Grace didn't answer right away. She thought about the last 6 months, the trials, the testimony, the sleepless nights. But she also thought about Mrs. Tully, about the headstones, about the 11 names that were finally remembered. "I'll think about it," Grace said. Dr. Voss smiled. "That's all I ask." Grace stood and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Dr. Voss?" "Yes?" "Thank you for believing me." Dr. Voss nodded. "Thank you for not giving up." Grace walked out. She took the elevator down, walked through the lobby, and stepped outside. The sun was setting, the air was cool. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Reeves answered on the second ring. Sullivan, what's up? They offered me my job back. No kidding. You taking it? Grace looked up at the hospital. I don't know yet. Well, if you don't, I've got another offer for you. What kind of offer? The kind that involves a badge and a lot of paperwork. Grace smiled. You want me to join the Navy? Not the Navy, FBI. Lennox is building a task force. She wants people who've been through the fire, people she can trust. Grace felt her pulse quicken. What would I be doing? Hunting the ones who got away. Grace went still. What do you mean? Reeves' voice dropped. We got Mercer. We got Marsh. We got the big names. But the network's still out there, smaller, quieter, but still operational. And Lennox wants me to help take them down? She wants both of us. Grace looked at the hospital one more time. Then she made her decision. When do we start? Reeves laughed. That's my girl. I'll send you the details. Welcome to the fight, Sullivan. The line went dead. Grace pocketed her phone and started walking. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in 6 years, she wasn't running. She was hunting, and somewhere out there, in the shadows, the people who thought they'd gotten away were about to learn a hard lesson. Grace Sullivan wasn't nobody anymore. She was the woman who'd brought down an empire, and she was just getting started. Grace didn't go home that night. She drove straight to FBI headquarters in Washington. Reeves met her in the parking garage, leaning against a black sedan, arms crossed. That was fast, he said. You said the network's still out there. I'm not waiting. Reeves pushed off the car. Lennox is upstairs. She's expecting you. They took the elevator to the 7th floor. The building hummed with activity even at this hour. Agents moving through corridors, phones ringing, voices sharp with urgency. Lennox's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. She looked up as they entered. Sullivan, you made a decision. I'm in. Lennox nodded. Good. Sit. Grace sat. Reeves took the chair beside her. Lennox pulled up a screen on her monitor and turned it toward them. We've identified 17 operatives still active. Most are low-level, couriers, fixers, but 3 are significant. The screen showed 3 faces. The first was a woman in her 40s, blonde, expensive suit. Dr. Cassandra York, pharmaceutical executive. She's been supplying restricted compounds to contractors for years. Vecuronium, fentanyl derivatives, experimental toxins. The second was a man in his 60s, military uniform. Colonel Travis Dunn, retired. He ran logistics for the Kandahar operation, moved shipments, covered tracks. The third was younger, mid-30s, unremarkable face. Julian Cross, tech specialist. He scrubs digital footprints, makes people disappear from databases. Grace studied the faces. Where are they now? York's in New York, Dunn's in Colorado. Cross moves around, but we think he's in Baltimore. You want us to bring them in? Reeves asked. Eventually, but first we need to understand the full scope. Who else is involved? Where the money's going? What they're planning next? Lennox leaned back. We're not just arresting people, we're dismantling infrastructure. Grace looked at the screen. How long? Weeks, maybe months. This won't be fast. I don't care about fast, I care about finished. Lennox smiled faintly. Then we'll get along just fine. She handed Grace a folder. Your credentials, badge, clearance, you're officially a federal consultant assigned to the Counterterrorism Division. Grace opened the folder. Her photo stared back at her. The badge felt heavier than she expected. You'll work directly with Reeves, Lennox continued. He'll handle tactical. You'll handle intelligence, medical backgrounds, behavioral patterns. You know how these people think. Because I've seen them kill. Exactly. Reeves stood. When do we start? Tonight. Lennox pulled up another file. We intercepted communications between York and an unknown party. They're meeting tomorrow. Brooklyn. We need eyes on that meeting. Grace stood. What's the play? Surveillance. Record everything. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. And if they run? Lennox's expression hardened. Then you stop them. The flight to New York left at 200 hours. Grace and Reeves landed at JFK just after dawn. A black SUV was waiting. No driver, just keys in the ignition. Reeves drove. Grace reviewed the files. Dr. Cassandra York lived in a penthouse on the Upper East Side. $30 million view, private security. The kind of place where neighbors didn't ask questions. The meeting was scheduled for 1400 hours at a restaurant in Brooklyn. High end. Reservation under a fake name. Grace memorized the details. The layout. The exits. The blind spots. By the time they reached the safe house in Brooklyn, she had a plan. Reeves parked 2 blocks from the restaurant. They sat in the SUV, watching the entrance through a telephoto lens. At 13:55 hours, a black town car pulled up. Dr. York stepped out. Tailored coat. Designer heels. She looked like she was going to brunch, not a clandestine meeting. Grace adjusted the lens. She's alone. No security. Overconfident, Reeves muttered. At 14:02 hours, a second car arrived. A man stepped out. 50s. Gray suit. Grace didn't recognize him. Run his face, she said. Reeves pulled out a tablet and snapped a photo. The facial recognition software churned for 10 seconds. Match. Thomas Brenner, CFO, Apex Dynamics. Grace's pulse spiked. He's supposed to be in prison. He posted bail last week, awaiting trial. He shouldn't be meeting with York. No, he shouldn't. They watched through the lens as York and Brenner entered the restaurant. They were seated at a corner table, out of sight from most angles. But not all. Grace pulled out a directional microphone and aimed it at the window. The audio crackled, then cleared. York's voice came through. Moving too fast. The indictments are spreading. We need to shut this down. Brenner's response was clipped. We can't. Not without exposing the rest. Then we cut losses, liquidate assets, disappear, and leave everything behind? Better than prison. Grace's jaw tightened. She looked at Reeves. They're running. Reeves was already typing. I'm alerting Lennox, York's voice continued. I've arranged transport, private jet, leaves tonight. Cayman Islands first, then further. What about the others? They're on their own. Grace felt her blood boil. We need to move. Now. Reeves shook his head. Lennox said surveillance only. They're about to disappear. If we lose them, we won't. Grace grabbed the door handle. I'm not letting them walk. Reeves caught her arm. Sullivan, wait. But Grace was already out of the SUV. She crossed the street, moving fast but controlled. Reeves swore and followed. Grace pushed through the restaurant door. The hostess looked up, startled. Table for 2? The hostess asked. Grace ignored her. She scanned the room and spotted York and Brenner in the corner. York saw her at the same moment. Her face went pale. Grace walked straight toward them. Reeves was right behind her, hand inside his jacket. Dr. York, Grace said, we need to talk. York stood, grabbing her purse. I don't know who you are, but... Grace pulled out her badge. FBI, sit down. Brenner stood too. This is harassment. We're leaving. Reeves stepped in front of him. No, you're not. York's hand went into her purse. Grace saw the movement, recognized it. Gun, she shouted. Reeves drew his weapon. Hands up, now! York pulled a small pistol from her purse and fired. The shot went wide, shattering a wine glass on the table behind Grace. Screams erupted. Diners dove for cover. Grace lunged forward, tackling York before she could fire again. They hit the floor hard, the gun skittering across the tile. Brenner tried to run. Reeves grabbed him, slammed him against the wall, and cuffed him in one smooth motion. Grace wrestled York onto her stomach and zip-tied her wrists. You're done. York spat at her. You're nobody. You can't stop this. Grace leaned in close. I already did. Sirens wailed outside. NYPD burst through the door, weapons drawn. Reeves held up his badge. Federal agents, we have the situation under control. The officers lowered their weapons but stayed alert. Grace hauled York to her feet and handed her off to one of the officers. She just attempted murder of a federal agent. Book her. York glared at her. This isn't over. Yeah, Grace said. It is. Lennox was furious. Grace and Reeves stood in her office 3 hours later, back in Washington. Lennox paced behind her desk, arms crossed. I said surveillance, she said, not engagement. They were about to run, Grace replied. We didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, and you chose to blow the operation. We stopped 2 fugitives from fleeing the country. That's not blowing the operation. That's doing our job. Lennox stopped pacing. York and Brenner were bait. We were using them to track the others. Now they know we're watching. Grace's stomach sank. You knew they were meeting? Of course I knew. I authorized the surveillance. Lennox leaned on her desk. York was supposed to lead us to Cross, to Dunn, to the whole network. But now, they've gone dark. Reeves stepped forward. We can still find them. How? They've scattered, erased their trails, we're back to square one. Grace felt the weight of the mistake settle on her shoulders. I'm sorry, I thought Rapo. You thought wrong. Lennox sat down heavily. You're good, Sullivan, but you're reckless, and reckless gets people killed. I know. Lennox rubbed her temples. York's in custody, so is Brenner. That's something, but the others are in the wind. Then we flush them out, Grace said. Lennox looked up. How? We make them think they're safe. Then we hit them when they surface. That could take months. Or it could take days, depends on how desperate they are. Lennox considered this, then nodded. Fine, but you follow protocol. No more cowboy moves. Understood. Lennox dismissed them with a wave. Grace and Reeves walked out. In the hallway, Reeves turned to her. You okay? No, I screwed up. You made a call. It didn't go the way we wanted, but York and Brenner are off the board. That's a win. Doesn't feel like one. Reeves put a hand on her shoulder. You're not used to this. Working with a team, following orders. You've been solo for so long. I know. But you're not solo anymore, and that means trusting the process. Grace nodded. I'll try. Good, because we've got work to do. The break came 2 weeks later. Grace was in the FBI analysis room, reviewing financial records, when the alert pinged. Facial recognition match, Julian Cross. Location, Baltimore Washington International Airport. Grace's pulse spiked. She grabbed her phone and called Reeves. Cross just surfaced, BWI. He's at the airport. I'm 10 minutes out, stall him. Grace was already moving. She grabbed her jacket, badge, and sidearm and sprinted for the garage. She made it to BWE in 18 minutes, breaking every speed limit. She ditched the car in short-term parking and ran into the terminal. Her phone buzzed. Reeves sent a screenshot of Cross's location. Gate C-14, flight to Mexico City, boards in 20 minutes. Grace pushed through the crowd, scanning faces, and then she saw him. Julian Cross. Standing near the gate, laptop bag over his shoulder, boarding pass in hand. Grace slowed her pace, kept her distance. Cross glanced around, nervous, twitchy. Grace pulled out her phone and texted Reeves. Visual confirmed. C-14, ready to move. Reeves's response was immediate. Wait for backup. 2 minutes out. Grace watched Cross step toward the gate agent. She couldn't wait. She moved. Julian Cross! Cross froze. His head snapped toward her. Grace held up her badge. FBI, step away from the gate. Cross didn't move. Now, Grace said. Cross dropped his bag and ran. Grace chased him through the terminal. He shoved past travelers, knocked over a luggage cart, and bolted toward the emergency exit. Grace was faster. She caught him at the door, grabbed his jacket, and slammed him against the wall. It's over, she said. Cross struggled. Get off me. Grace twisted his arm behind his back and cuffed him. You're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and about a dozen other charges I'm going to enjoy listing. Reeves appeared, breathing hard, weapon drawn. I said wait for backup. He was running. I noticed. Airport security arrived. Grace handed Cross off to them. Federal custody. Call Agent Lennox at FBI Counterterrorism. She'll handle transport. The security officers nodded. Grace stepped back, breathing hard. Reeves holstered his weapon. You're getting better at this. At what? Not getting shot. Grace smiled faintly. Progress. What? Colonel Travis Dunn was the last one. It took another month to find him. He'd gone deep, changed his name. Moved to a cabin in the Colorado Rockies. No phone, no internet, no trace. But Grace found him. She tracked his military pension payments, cross-referenced property records, narrowed it down to 3 locations. The third one was a hit. Lennox approved the operation. Full tactical team, Reeves and Grace on point. They flew to Denver and drove 6 hours into the mountains. The cabin was remote, surrounded by trees. One road in, one road out. They set up a perimeter at dawn. Grace and Reeves approached on foot, weapons ready. The cabin was dark. No movement. Reeves signaled the team. They moved in fast, breaching the door. Empty. Grace swept the rooms, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, all clear. But something was off. The bed was made. The kitchen clean. Too clean. Grace walked back to the living room. A coffee mug sat on the table, still warm. "He's close," she said. A gunshot shattered the window. Grace hit the floor. Reeves returned fire, covering her. "Back exit," Grace shouted. They moved through the cabin, clearing corners. Grace reached the back door and kicked it open. Dunn was 50 yards away, running toward the tree line. Grace sprinted after him. He turned and fired. The bullet kicked up dirt at her feet. Grace didn't slow. She tackled him at the edge of the trees. They hit the ground hard. Dunn swung the gun toward her face. Grace grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and slammed his hand against a rock. The gun fell. Dunn drove a fist into her ribs. Pain exploded. Grace gasped but held on. Reeves arrived, weapon trained. "Don't move!" Dunn stopped fighting. Grace cuffed him, breathing hard. "You're done." Dunn spat blood. "You think this changes anything? There's always another one, another network. You can't stop them all." Grace hauled him to his feet. "Maybe not, but I can stop you." They dragged him back to the cabin. The tactical team secured him in the transport vehicle. Grace leaned against a tree, catching her breath. Her ribs throbbed where Dunn had hit her. Reeves walked over. "You need a medic?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Grace straightened. "I said I'm fine." Reeves studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." They drove back to Denver in silence. Grace stared out the window at the mountains passing by. Each arrest brought a sense of closure, but also emptiness, like she was checking boxes on a list that never ended. At the airport, Lennox was waiting. She looked at Dunn as he was led past in handcuffs, then at Grace and Reeves. "Good work," she said. Grace nodded. Lennox pulled her aside. "That's all of them. York, Brenner, Cross, Dunn. The network's dismantled." "For now." "For now," Lennox agreed. "But that's the job. You tear down one network, another one grows in its place. You can't win. You can only keep fighting." Grace looked at her. "So what's the point?" "The point is the people you save along the way, the lives you protect, the truth you expose." Lennox paused. "The point is that someone has to stand in the gap. And today, that was you." Grace didn't respond. Lennox handed her an envelope. "This came for you, from the DOD." Grace opened it. Inside was a letter. Official letterhead, Secretary of Defense. She read it twice. "They're restoring my military record," she said quietly. "Full honors. Reinstatement of rank, back pay, everything." Grace folded the letter. "I didn't do this for recognition." "I know, but you earned it anyway." The final trial was 6 months later. Dr. Cassandra York, Thomas Brenner, Julian Cross, Colonel Travis Dunn. All convicted, all sentenced. York got 20 years, Brenner got 30, Cross got 15, Dunn got life. Grace sat in the courtroom as the verdicts were read. She felt nothing, no triumph, no relief, just tired. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, questions shouted. Grace pushed through them. Reeves and Lennox flanked her. "Miss Sullivan, how does it feel to bring down the network?" Grace didn't answer. "What's next for you?" Grace kept walking. Lennox's car was waiting. They climbed in. The driver pulled away from the chaos. Lennox looked at Grace. "You okay?" "I don't know." "That's honest." Grace looked out the window. "I thought this would feel different, like I'd finally be free." "And you're not?" "I don't know what I am." Lennox leaned back. "You're someone who fought for justice, who didn't give up, who made a difference." She paused. That's enough. Grace nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed it. Reeves spoke up from the front seat. You know what helped me after I got out? Grace looked at him. What? Finding something bigger than the fight, something to build instead of tear down. Like what? You'll know it when you find it. Yeah. 3 days later, Grace stood outside Riverside General Hospital again. Dr. Voss had called, asked her to come in, said it was important. Grace took the elevator to the 4th floor. Voss was waiting in her office. Miss Sullivan, thank you for coming. Grace sat. What's this about? Voss slid a folder across the desk. We've established a new position, Director of Patient Advocacy and Safety. It's hospital-wide. You'd oversee protocols, investigate complaints, train staff on recognizing warning signs, make sure what happened with Mercer never happens again. Grace opened the folder. The job description was detailed, comprehensive, the kind of position that could actually change things. Why me? She asked. Because you're the only person who fought when everyone else stayed silent. That's who we need. Grace looked at the folder, then at Voss. I need to think about it. Voss nodded. Take your time. But I hope you'll say yes. This hospital needs you. The patients need you. Grace left the office and walked through the hospital. She passed Trauma 4, the room where it all started. The door was open. A new patient inside. A team working to save a life. Grace stood in the doorway, watching. A young nurse, maybe 25, was calling out vitals. Her hand shook slightly as she adjusted the IV. The attending barked an order. The nurse hesitated. Grace stepped into the room. What's the hesitation? She asked. The nurse looked up, startled. I think the dosage is wrong. The attending glared. I said push the epi. Grace looked at the syringe, then at the patient's chart. She's right, Grace said. That's twice the recommended dose for his weight. The attending's face flushed. And who are you? Someone who's seen what happens when doctors don't listen to nurses. Grace turned to the young nurse. What's the correct dose? The nurse's voice steadied. 0.5 milligrams. Then give him 0.5. The nurse looked at the attending. He hesitated, then nodded. The nurse administered the correct dose. The patient's heart rate stabilized. Grace looked at the young nurse. Good catch. Thank you. Grace walked out. That was her answer. She called Voss the next morning. I'll take the job. Voss sounded relieved. I'm glad. When can you start? Monday. Perfect. I'll have HR send over the paperwork. Grace hung up and sat in her apartment, looking around. For 6 years, this place had been a hiding spot, a place to disappear, but not anymore. She pulled out her phone and texted Reeves. I'm staying in Richmond. Took a job at the hospital. His response came quickly. Good. You belong there. Then another text. But you're still consulting for us, right? Grace smiled. When you need me. We'll always need you. Grace set the phone down and stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in this city, someone was being dismissed, overlooked, told they were wrong. And maybe, just maybe, Grace could help them find their voice. Because she'd learned something in the last year. The world doesn't change because powerful people decide to do the right thing. It changes because ordinary people refuse to stay silent. It changes because someone, anyone, decides that enough is enough. And sometimes that someone is a nurse who everyone thought was nobody. 6 months later, Grace received an invitation. A dedication ceremony. Arlington National Cemetery. She drove there on a Saturday morning. The air was crisp, the leaves were turning. The ceremony was small, just families, veterans, a few officials. Admiral Calloway stood at the front, older now, grayer, but still strong. He saw Grace and smiled. She walked over. Sullivan, good to see you. You too, Admiral. Calloway gestured to the memorial behind him. They finished it last week. Grace turned. A new monument stood among the headstones. Black granite. 11 names carved into the stone. In memory of those who served and sacrificed. Kandahar, 2018. Below the names, a single line. Their truth will not be silenced. Grace felt her throat tighten. Mrs. Tully approached. She placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for bringing them home." Grace couldn't speak. She just nodded. The ceremony began. A chaplain spoke about sacrifice and memory. Families laid flowers. A bugler played taps, the notes carrying across the cemetery. When it ended, Calloway walked over to Grace. "You did this," he said. "No, we did this." Calloway shook his head. "You started it. You refused to let them be forgotten. That takes courage most people don't have." Grace looked at the memorial. "I just did what was right." "Exactly." Calloway extended his hand. "Thank you, Grace. For everything." Grace shook it. "Thank you for believing me." Calloway walked away. Grace stood alone in front of the memorial. 11 names, 11 lives, 11 soldiers who died because someone decided they were inconvenient, but they weren't forgotten. Not anymore. Grace pulled out her phone and took a photo. Then she turned and saw someone standing at a distance. Detective Brennan. Grace walked over. Brennan's face had healed from the beating she'd taken months ago, but there were lines there that hadn't been before. "I didn't expect to see you here," Grace said. Brennan shrugged. "I worked the case. Felt right to pay respects." They stood together in silence for a moment. "How's the force?" Grace asked. "Different. They promoted me, made me lead investigator on corruption cases." Brennan smiled faintly. "Turns out punching federal agents in defense of the truth is good for your career." Grace laughed. "Who knew?" "What about you? I heard you're back at the hospital." "Yeah, Director of Patient Advocacy." "Fancy title." "It's just making sure people listen when something's wrong." Brennan nodded. "That's important work." "So is yours." They shook hands. Brennan walked back to her car. Grace stayed a few minutes longer, looking at the memorial one last time. Then she left. That night, Grace sat in her apartment. The lights were off. The city hummed outside her window. Her phone buzzed. A text from Reeves. "Drinks tomorrow?" "I'm buying." Grace smiled. "You're always buying, because you're always saving my ass." Grace laughed and typed back, "Deal." Another text came through. This one from a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Sullivan, this is Captain Rodriguez, NCIS. We have a situation that requires your expertise. Can we talk?" Grace stared at the message. The fight never ended. There would always be another case, another network, another person who needed someone to stand up. She could say no, could focus on the hospital, build a quiet life. But that wasn't who she was anymore. Grace typed back, "When and where?" The response came immediately. "Tomorrow, 900, FBI headquarters." Grace set the phone down and looked around her apartment. For 6 years, this place had been a hiding spot, a refuge from a world that had tried to break her. But she wasn't hiding anymore. She stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, millions of lights, millions of lives. Somewhere out there, someone was being silenced, overlooked, dismissed, and Grace was ready to fight for them. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to make a difference. You don't have to have power or status or recognition. You just have to refuse to give up. You have to stand your ground when everyone else walks away. You have to believe that one person, even someone the world calls nobody, can change everything. Grace had been that person, the quiet nurse, the invisible one, the woman everyone underestimated. Until she wasn't. Until she became the most dangerous person in the building. Not because she had power, but because she had truth, and she refused to let it die. Grace smiled. She wasn't nobody anymore. She was Grace Sullivan, combat medic, nurse, federal consultant, advocate, fighter, and most importantly, survivor. She'd been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. But she'd fought back. She'd exposed the truth, brought justice, saved lives. And she wasn't done. Not even close. Because the world was full of people who thought they could get away with anything, people who thought power meant they were untouchable, people who thought the quiet ones didn't matter. And Grace Sullivan was going to spend the rest of her life proving them wrong. One case at a time, one fight at a time, one truth at a time. She turned away from the window and picked up her phone. Tomorrow, there would be another mission, another battle. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of peace, a moment to remember how far she'd come. From the field hospital in Kandahar to the trauma room in Richmond. From the basement where she'd been held at gunpoint to the courtroom where justice was served. From nobody to somebody. From invisible to unstoppable. Grace set her phone down and closed her eyes, and for the first time in 6 years she slept without nightmares, because the ghosts that had haunted her were finally at rest. The 11 names carved in stone at Arlington weren't just memories anymore. They were a promise, a reminder that truth matters, that justice matters, that every life matters, even the ones the world tries to forget. Grace Sullivan had made sure they would be remembered. And in doing so, she'd become unforgettable herself, not because she wanted recognition, but because she'd proven that one person fighting for what's right can take down an empire. And that's a lesson the world wouldn't soon forget. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous. And Grace Sullivan had just shown everyone why.